Hey guys, and welcome to Fika with Rice, a podcast about life hacks, inspirational life stories, routines, and keys to success. I'm your host, Fredrik, and each week I meet some of the most incredible people in the world, from self-made millionaires, best-selling authors, experts, and world-class athletes. My goal is to extract their wisdom, mindset, tools so you can use them in your daily life, but above all, to inspire you. Let's get this Fika started. Welcome to episode 6 by Fika with Rice. This is a special episode where we meet David Allen, the godfather of productivity and the New York Times bestselling author who has sold over 1.5 million books around the world. David is the inventor of the Getting Things Done system, which allows you to stay organized, on top of your things, and feel less stressful. A system used by champions such as Will Smith and Robert Downey Jr. Let's get this conversation started. Let's go. Hello, David. Welcome to Fika with Rice. I'm really grateful to have you here on the show. To be honest, you literally changed my life. I read your book back in 2013, and it changed the way I viewed my work and life. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And thanks for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
Thank you, David. For you out there who doesn't know David Allen is the godfather of productivity. David Allen is the author of Getting Things Done, which is the Bible of productivity, which has sold over 1.5 million copies of his really simple yet effective productivity system. He's also a black belt in karate, which I love. All right, David, I thought to start by asking you, what did karate and martial arts teach you about discipline growing up?
Taught me a lot about focus. The necessity to focus. I mean, a lot of what the power in karate is your ability to focus. And it also taught me that you have to, in order to, the power in a karate punch doesn't come from muscle, it comes from speed. But a tense muscle is a slow one. So learning to relax so that you could then really focus at the end of a punch is really critical. So those two elements, sort of relaxing so that you can be powerful, winds up, I didn't know it then, but now in retrospect, I can look back and say, that was a really good, not just a metaphor, it's a real example of now what the cognitive scientists have come up with, called, if you want to really think smart, really have optimal cognitive ability, you better relax. Your brain had better have rest time. You better, step back and daydream and give yourself the freedom to be spontaneous. But that's hard to do if you're not managing your life really well. So, a lot of sort of the impetus for me to unfold and uncover and identify the best practices for productivity, a whole lot of that was my desire to, how do I stay clear and free as my life got more complex? And so I just discovered piece by piece, elements of this methodology that then finally, after 20 years, I put them in a book called Getting Things Done. That's a short version of a very long story, Fredrik, as you probably can imagine. So.
Yes, that's amazing. How long have you been training martial arts now? I know that from my homework, it's already from the 60s. So during Bruce Lee's time.
Yeah. No, I haven't really trained in years. I mean, I haven't really worked out in years. But it's kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you get to at least black belt level in karate, there's stuff you just never forget that you can still do. But I haven't really trained in a long time. It took about 4 or 5 years for me to get a black belt. In the 60s, in my 20s, then. And there are a couple of other times I got back in shape and was teaching kids and karate and so forth. But other than that, I haven't really trained in the martial arts for many years.
How was it to grow up during the 60s in California when Bruce Lee was like the GOAT, basically? Actually, I have a Bruce Lee t-shirt on me today here.
Oh my God, look at that. Yeah. Well, that was back in the early days when karate was still fairly new in the U.S. And it turned out that my sensei turned out to be a good friend of mine. He had studied Chinese, Korean, and Japanese in karate, those different styles. And so he had sort of created this American blend. And the Americans were pretty good at blending stuff, instead of staying in one particular style or the other. They just took the best of the best. And of course, Bruce Lee was the ultimate of that. He just took the best of the best. His whole thing was, how effective can you be? How powerful can you be with as little effort as possible? And that was his whole thing. And that's where Jeet Kune Do, which was the style that kind of came out of his thinking, was there. But that was pretty much brand new at that time in the 60s. And people were sort of enthralled by that. Not many people really knew about it. Certainly not like today. So that's a little bit of the history of my history, anyway.
Yes. You're above 70 now, David.
75, exactly.
Yes. I was going to be humble there and polite, but okay, thank you.
Hey, what the heck? I'm really glad to get older. I was so stupid last year. Every year I'm smarter. So
I love that mindset. That's a white belt mindset, I like to call it.
Of course.
But let's say that you could go back in time and meet your 20-year-old, your 20-year-old David. What would the 75-year-old tell him?
Relax.
Ah.
That it's okay, and start following. Follow more what your own internal hunches tell you to do and what you really want to do, and as opposed to trying to do what you think other people want you to do. It's kind of hard when I look back and say, is there anything I would do different? Of course not. I have a great life right now and a fabulous career, and it took a long while to get there, and I paid my dues, but there's nothing I would change about that. So I would just say the only thing that I probably didn't do back then as well as I could have was relax and pay more attention to what my own internal direction might be, as opposed to trying to be good to everybody or do what I thought was right.
We're working with a lot of young people, and a lot of them they're stressed, and they have a lot of anxiety. They don't know what they're gonna do. They've invested a lot in their education, primarily in the US and the UK, right? Where it's so
just take them out on a ship and throw them over the water, overboard, and those won't be issues anymore. So it's the stress of opportunity, really.
Yeah.
And there's so many choices that people could make now because they have the freedom to do that. But all you have to do is throw yourself into a crisis situation and all those go away. That's why a lot of people in crisis actually get into the zone. They get more into the zone because it simplifies your life. They'll survive, right?
It's true.
And so your taxes and new tires on your car and hiring the vice president and fixing the tooth that hurts just go out the window if you're thrown overboard and have to survive. So, I'm not trying to be, too simplistic about this, but that's, the high stress out there is usually because people just have a lot of opportunities. And, depending on their situation, whether they feel like they need to be more competitive or they need to do better or whatever, they may have a lot of things that are causing that. And I understand now, given the pandemic and COVID and coronavirus that's going on, people have had to change a lot of their lifestyle and their work style. And those changes have forced people to throw themselves kind of overboard. And now, how do I now engage with the changes that have happened? But again, that's why, I go back to my martial arts training. A whole lot of that was being ready for surprise. So, if 4 people jump you in a dark alley, you don't want 2,000 unprocessed emails somehow hanging around your head. You need to be clear. So the whole idea of being clear, so you're ready for surprise and you're ready for change, is a lot of what people need to, probably more incorporate into their life and their work style so that they're ready for surprise. That's why when I'm not doing anything else, Fredrik, I'm cleaning up my in-basket to zero because I got stuff coming toward me I can't see. And when that happens, I don't want any backlog or as little backlog as possible in terms of stuff I haven't decided about or made decisions about or haven't, appropriately engaged with, in getting in the way of my ability to make good conscious choices and spontaneous choices in the moment.
I like that. I resonate a lot with that. I train martial arts. I started 2 years ago. I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And of course, as an entrepreneur, I deal with a lot of stress, email inboxes, employees, team members that need things, customers, and so on. But I love the simplicity because when you have a 80, 100 kilo man on your back trying to choke you, there's only one thing in my mind. It's survival, and it simplifies things. And I see a red thread on how martial arts, you can take that into life and your workplace, and you can make it so much easier. A lot of your thinking process. You said that you clean your desk when you're not doing anything. I love that. Through my homework before this chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes what you read on the internet is incorrect. But you're a big fan of Japan and Japanese things and being simplistic. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that affects a little bit of your productivity?
I'm not sure exactly how it all came together, but I was very fascinated by the sort of the aesthetic, the Japanese aesthetic from an early time. I when I was in high school, I read all of Suzuki and Alan Watts and so forth, and the whole idea of the Zen simplicity of life and sort of the elegance of that simplicity and empty space, was something I always resonated with. It just seemed to make a lot of sense to me, and I just enjoyed the aesthetic. So. It's sort of it's easy to be complex. It's hard to be simple. And so, simplifying your life is quite a craft to be able to do that. And that doesn't mean that you have to be ascetic and go live in a cave and eat out of a rice bowl and, so forth. I mean, that's okay too. But to be able to simplify your life when there's so much complexity around you and so many opportunities to add complexity to your life, it is a martial art.
I love that. It's true. I think it's really hard for people today, right, David? Like, how do you simplify your life when you have so many clothing shops out there? You have so many phone options. You have social media out there. You have external pressure, anxiety, and you have so many choices today, right? I'm sure like 2021 versus 1960, we're living in a different world. I don't know. Would you say it's more difficult to grow up and live in today's society versus 20, 30, 40 years ago?
I don't know. Come on. I wasted time 2 hours on the telephone with my girlfriend when I was 14. So I don't think there's nothing new about that. So all kinds of people can waste time doing all kinds of things, or what you call waste time. But I was in love at age 14, and hanging out with her on the telephone was just one of the coolest things to do. So, there's nothing new in terms of human nature, I think, about what are the things that attract us and whether that's on course or off course for us. I think those are life issues that we constantly deal with. I don't think there's anything new about that. I think what's new is how frequently things are new. As you and I are talking right now, Fredrik, there's stuff landing in our in baskets that totally blow the hell out of what you think your priorities are for the afternoon.
It's true. It is true.
Right. That wasn't true 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I mean, it was true that, you could get a phone call or something could happen, but it wasn't that often. I mean, how many times did your parents had to reconfigure their lives in terms of, what they were doing and how they were, and have to rethink and recalibrate and refocus given the changes went on with them? I don't know. I'm guessing most people, maybe their parents 2, 3, 4 times in their lives had to totally rethink what they were doing, if at all. And now it's weekly. You got to rethink your life, really fast. And so nothing new except how frequently the things are new. And therefore the requirement to then stay on top of the changing world. See, at some point things change and then you put it under you, and then you're out of your comfort zone. And then you sort of get comfortable about the new job or the new thing or the new gig. And pretty soon you get onto cruise control. Pretty soon it gets into a rhythm. And so you're not so disturbed or distracted by that. So that only happens every 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's one thing. If that happens every 3 or 4 or 5 months, that's another. So that's what's different, is how the frequency of change.
David, you mentioned Zen Buddhism. I wanted to bring it up. I'm happy that you brought it up. You're 75 now. What has Zen Buddhism taught you about life?
I don't know. You see, I never really studied Zen as a disciplined, study. I never went and sat zazen, for hours and hours and did all that. I've certainly read about a lot of that stuff. So I'm kind of a lazy man Zen, practitioner, but, there was a great classic book, Zen and the Art of In-Basket Maintenance, or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which was a great By the way, we thought we were going to actually title the book "Getting Things Done: The Zen and the Art of In-Basket Maintenance." Sort of the same sort of idea, but the simple sort of perceptions of Zen Buddhism, and also, I very much resonate with the esoteric Sufis, Rumi and other people like that, who essentially it's kind of what I so love is this sort of how would I say this the sacred irreverence. It's called nothing. Don't take anything too seriously. And it's all there. It's all in everything. It's all in the ordinariness of life. You don't have to go further than where you are, to relax and sort of let the truth emerge. Because, and a lot of, I think that's just a lot of what I've discovered in my 75 years is a lot of it is more about unfolding as opposed to adding into. It's more about, finding out who you really are, finding out what's really true, or finding out what's the essence of something. To me, that's just an elegant, aesthetic or an elegant approach to stuff. And these days, people certainly don't need more to do. Everybody's already up to here.
It's true.
Stuff to do. What they need to do is to figure out, how do I simplify my engagement, essentially, or get more elegant with my engagement. See, here's a big secret, Fredrik, and don't tell anybody this. Okay, this is only between you and me, right?
Okay.
But getting things done is not so much about getting more done. It's about creating appropriate engagement with all your commitments with yourself and anybody else, so that you're fully present with whatever you're doing. An appropriate engagement, so that something's not on your mind. Usually, and probably people listening, what we've been talking for, 10, 15 minutes. And most people listening or watching this have probably had their mind go somewhere else other than what you and I have been talking about.
Yes.
Right. And so that, whether I don't care, but they may. In other words, they lost their focus or their attention on what you and I were talking about and went somewhere else. The somewhere else is what I'm talking about. Why did they go somewhere else? Usually what has people's attention is something they're not yet appropriately engaged with, some situation, some circumstance, some input, something that they know they still need to decide or do something about or with. They just haven't decided that yet. And even if they haven't parked some reminder in some place they trust they'll see at the right time. And so that's why it's still got people's attention. But if you don't pay appropriate attention to what has your attention, it'll take more of your attention than it deserves. So that's one of the problems. That's one of the things that I've solved over all these years is, how do I get stuff off my mind without having to finish it? And it's not free. You don't get there by drinking or meditating or zazen. I don't care how much zazen you do. If you still need cat food pops into your mind, you're still going to have that deal with that, at some point. And the mindfulness people these days, focus on your breathing. Sure, all that's really good stuff. But I learned that 40 years ago in the martial arts. That's all good stuff. But not dealing appropriately with the things that you have allowed yourself to be engaged with in your life, that's where a lot of the stress is coming from. So
yeah.
How do I engage? How do I deal with the stuff that's got my attention? How do I deal with stuff that's on my mind? And here's the big problem, Fredrik, as you probably know by now, your head is just a really crappy office. And most people are still trying to use their head as a way to remember, remind, prioritize, and manage relationships between all their commitments. And it sucks. As an office, you did not evolve, your brain did not evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, or manage relationships between more than 4 things. That's now proven cognitive science. 4 things. As soon as you have more than 4 things you're trying to keep track of, remind yourself about, or be engaged in appropriately, you're going to sub-optimize your cognitive ability. You won't be able to take a test as well. You won't be able to think as well. You won't be able to cook spaghetti as well. You won't be able to, be present with your kids or your life partner like you'd like to, because that stuff is going to be spinning. So I just figured out, how do I stop the spin? And you can't stop life giving you stuff to spin about. You wouldn't want to, because, come on, cool stuff showing up, new things. You have new visions, new goals, things you want to do, things you want to accomplish. But as you start to commit to those, then you need to then appropriately engage with those commitments. And that's what people haven't done for the most part. That's where a lot of the stress is coming from.
Yes. I resonate a lot with that. You were talking about unfolding yourself as well, not to add complexity, but actually looking at your own plate of food and like, all right, what can I actually do in the most effective way? I think it's a very good reminder. I know in your book you talk about mastering the small things instead of going for the big one goal. And what does that mean?
Well, the big one goal always comes down to a small thing to do about it, right? You can't actually do a project. You can't actually do a goal. You can only do actions, but if you do enough of the right actions, then you produce the result. The project is finished, the goal has been accomplished, etc. So you can't actually do any of those things. Those things give you direction. They don't give you instruction about how you start to move toward it. So, first of all, why are you doing this thing? How important is that goal to you? How important is that outcome? And that's where, I describe the different horizons we have commitments. The 6 horizons you have, at the top called what's your purpose in life? What are your core values? You come down from that a next level of operationally. You say, well, what's the vision of your life 5 years from now? What do you want to be doing? While success would feel like what? And then, by the way, then come down another level and then what are the things you need to accomplish over the next 3 to 24 months that are going to get you to your vision about what you're doing? That's another horizon of commitment. But then you come down to what are all the things you need to maintain so you can even move that way? Your health, your vitality, your relationships, your finances. You need to manage all of those and make sure that they're up to snuff. And then you have all the projects, all the things that you can't finish in one sitting that you need to do about any of those things. Hire the vice president, fix the tooth that hurts, decide whether to adopt or not. Come on, those are the projects that people have about all those open loops or all those things that are moving parts, what I just mentioned. And then you have all the actions you need to take about those. And most people, at least professionally, have somewhere between 30 and 100 projects. And most of those people have somewhere between 100 and 200 next actions they need or should take on any of those to appropriately engage with them. Emails to send, calls to make, websites to surf, stuff to talk to your partners about, all that. So I couldn't get it any simpler than what I just said. Those are all the things that are true for everybody. You just need to, hey, it's a game you need to be playing out there. And, then threading yourself through and navigating through all that complexity is a martial art. Back to that point.
Why do you think most people, David, fail to follow their planning and their system in order to stay organized and stay productive and stay efficient in their work and life as well? The martial art that you call it.
I don't know. And one way to think about that is most people's their resistance to implementing. What I came up with is their addiction to stress, their willingness to tolerate that ambient anxiety that shows up if you haven't managed these things really well. They're willing to tolerate it. Doesn't mean they need to go shoot up stress. It's not like that kind of addiction, but it's the willingness to tolerate that. I can't tolerate. If I make a commitment with you, Fredrik, believe me, I have pen and paper right here. I'm going to write that down immediately because I can't stand stuff spinning around in my head. It's just not the place to do that. Right. So I've just changed my habits about being able to externalize all my commitments or potential commitments so that my head's clear to be making good conscious decisions about it. But though that's a simple thing to understand and a simple thing to do, actually, most people are not willing to do that because they're willing to tolerate the spin that gets created by keeping these commitments inside their head. And when you do that, see your head, that part of your head that's hanging onto that has no sense of past or future. So it thinks you should be doing all those psychologically all the time. That's why you're so stressed out. That's why you're waked up at 3 o'clock in the morning about stuff you can't do spit about. You can't buy cat food at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't hire a vice president at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why is that still on your mind? Because you haven't decided what those things mean to you and haven't organized reminders with yourself or the right people to make sure that they're reminded of those things at the right time in the right place. And in a sense, that's all it is. So, I just got addicted to a clear head, and so anything that then spins around in there, what do I need to do to get that off my mind? And that would be the driving question I would have for anybody listening or watching this. I say, what do you need to do to get those things off your mind where your mind has gone while you've been listening to me and Fredrik?
I love that you showed your notebook. Is that something that you carry with you all the time, David?
Well, no, this one's just on my desk because, who knows. I've written 3 notes already. My wife came in and said, "Gee, David, blah, 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 blah." I just wrote it down, right? What you just said, because I couldn't do it right then. What I carry around with me is a little notepad and a little pen, with my credit cards and.
I love that one. Yeah, that one is really practical.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's with me because most of your good ideas don't happen where you're going to implement those ideas. They happen while you're in some strange places and context. So the muse is quite fickle. She will show up and give you a good idea, and then she goes away, and you think you'll never forget that idea. And then 2 minutes later, when the next idea pops into your head, you forgot the first thing. Right? So if you want to be really efficient and effective in terms of creative, inspirational thinking, you better have a capture tool with you all the time. Something that you can grab those things. I throw away 80% of those things because I don't know which ones are good and which ones aren't. I will later on when I sit down and more in executive thinking mode, then I can decide, that's a dumb idea. Or, that reminds me, I ought to. So that's why, I identified the 5 steps of how you get sort of in control of your life and work is that's you capture the stuff that has your attention that you might need to decide or do something about. You need to get that out of your head. And then sooner than later, you need to clarify what those things mean, what you're going to do about them, if anything. Then you need to have some organization system, some sort of list manager that can keep track of the errands you need to run, stuff you need to talk to your partner about, websites you need to surf or whatever, if you can't finish them the moment you think of them. And then you have some sort of a reflection or review process that steps back and looks at all the commitments at all those different levels so that then step 5, you engage your attention and your activity in some trusted way as opposed to, gee, I hope this is what I need to do. You need to take a look at all the things you could be doing or should be doing and say, no, this is what I'm doing, not those right now. And that's really all this is about, is like just getting yourself to be present with whatever it is you're doing and not be distracted. But you can't do that unless you're really, I say discipline, but it's really more direction than discipline. Discipline sounds hard work and sweat, come on. You just need to direct yourself to think about the right things in the right way. And then, direct where you then organize or park the results of that thinking.
This system, the 5-step, that is also in your book, David. You use this with a lot of successful people out there, like thousands of ultra successful people and productive people in the world, anywhere from like corporate CEOs, CFOs, I'm sure politicians as well, sports people, astronauts. What's the one thing they have in common that makes them so productive, you would say?
Well, it depends on what you mean by productive. I mean, productive, most people think about productivity as I can produce a lot of money or produce a business or I produce this thing. But productivity really just means achieving whatever it is that you're after. If you take a vacation to relax and you don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. So productivity just means, what are you after? And that could be an experience or an internal experience or a feeling that you want to have. I want to relax tonight. And if you relax tonight, you're being productive. You're moving towards something that you want to do. So I understand what you say. There are a lot of people most attracted to my work happen to be, some of the people that need it the least because they're already aspirational and positively focused and, moving forward or whatever. And a lot of those people just have, built in their ability to be able to then follow some sort of vision or some sort of thing they want to be able to accomplish that's not true yet. So they have that aspirational quality, about getting there or being able to do that. And they bought into some vision of themselves or some sort of an outcome that they're after. And, they follow along with that. And a lot of those folks tend to stress themselves out a lot because oftentimes their vision, has them run past their ability to keep up with it. A lot of them, have sort of thrown themselves and created goals out further than their systems and their own personal behaviors can keep up with. So they've stressed themselves out by sort of overwhelming themselves with that. And they already know the value of system. That's what got them there to begin with. They already know the value of good decision making. They know the value of organization. They just have gone past, they need to improve all that to be able to then give them more room. Because you don't need time, you just need room. You don't need time to have a good idea. You don't need time to be creative. You don't need time to be present. You just need room in your head. So all you have to do is identify what's on your mind, what's in your head, and then how do you get it out of your head? How do you then organize that appropriately? That'll give you a lot more room. How you use that room will be up to you. Some people use it to be more creative. Some people use it to be more strategic. Some people use it just to be more present with their kids.
I like what you're saying about that your personal vision must be aligned with your system or your planning that you have. And I like that a lot, because I feel a lot of people have a vision, but they don't have the foundation and the personal system that makes them achieve their vision.
Well, interestingly, the zeros and ones, if you wanted to reduce productivity down, it's outcome and action. What is the outcome? What am I trying to produce? What am I trying to get to? And then how do I allocate or reallocate my resources and my attention to move toward that, to move the needle, toward that outcome? And outcome and action actually require two different parts of your psyche. The outcome part is the visionary part. That's the forebrain part that has goals. Here's what I want to do. Here's my vision. And then the limbic part, the other part, is the execution part that says, what do I need to do now? I need to write something. I need to type something. I need to, whatever you need to do, the doing execution part. But they're equally important. The vision without action is just, fluff. Action without vision is just drudgery. So, the hope of the world is that you have a vision, but then can execute on that vision on a day-to-day, on a mundane level, if you will. That's the magic of the mundane. See, every mundane thing you're doing actually is coming from some other big reason. I need cat food. Why? I have a cat. Why do you have a cat? Well, I love kitten. I love to have a cat, Well, and what do you love about having a cat? Well, it kind of opens my heart when I walk in and they come up and sit on my lap. Yay. Why do you like that? Well, when I feel sort of loving and more engaged with, in a positive way with this wonderful little kitten, I'm easier to live with. And why is that important to you? Well, if I'm easier to live with, things work a lot better and I can move, yada, yada, yada. So there's the 5 whys, it's good old consulting stuff. Just take everything and say, why are you doing that? And well, why are you doing that? Well, and then why are you doing that? Why is that important? So you can back even the most mundane things up in your life and you'd find out, well, there's a reason I'm actually doing that comes from some higher horizon in terms of your commitments or your standards or your values.
David, for those that, can you name some of the famous people that are big fans of the GTD system? You help thousands of people.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. The ones who've been public about it would be like Will Smith or Robert Downey Jr. or Howard Stern. These are people who've publicly said, "Hey, you need to rock David Allen." If you're gonna do that. And these guys are managing not only their entertainment careers, but they all have businesses as well. They're all busy folks. So those are some. I coached the work with the head of the World Bank. So a lot of folks.
Some heavyweights, huh? Will Smith and you said, let me see, you said Howard Stern as well. These are really, really heavyweights out there. So amazing. Yeah. You must be really proud.
It's wonderful. I've been graced to have uncovered something that doesn't hurt anybody, and anybody who uses it, could improve their condition. And it also kind of fooled me, Fredrik. In the early days, I thought, well, the more sophisticated people are, the less they'd be interested in this because they'd already done this. Like, no. Turns out that the more sophisticated people were and the busier and more successful they were, the more they hungered for what I'd come up with. Anyway.
Yeah. From the outside, I don't know Howard Stern or Will Smith personally, but from the outside, they seem very, very effective people and productive and like in their zone, so to speak, in control of their lives,
Sure. Well, managing the flow of, as I say, managing the flow of life's work and your commitments is a how good can you get at cooking spaghetti? How good can you get at being a parent? How good could you get at playing the flute? How good could you get at karate? There's no end to any of those. They're sort of ongoing things you always can refine and find a better way to do it and so forth. And so, being essentially productive, if you want to take it in the broadest sense of that, it's a lifelong craft. You'll get better and better at it. You'll find better and better ways to be even more effective and efficient if you want to stay in the game, of doing that. It's not something you finally get and then never have to do anything else about it. I still have to do exactly what I teach. I still have to deal with the notes that I just took, I still have to deal with, I'm learning Dutch. So my Dutch teacher gave me this thing I had to print out. So now I got to figure out what to do with that. Here's an invoice that I need to make sure I pay and relative to, whatever. So I don't get rid of that. So I still have to, as we say, eat my own dog food. I think they had a Purina or somewhere years ago, made that a famous statement because he was willing to eat the dog food that they made. And so it's one thing to teach it, it's nothing to do what you're doing. And I was doing all this stuff before I even started to teach it, just for myself. And then turned around in my consulting practice, started to use what I'd uncovered for myself. And it turned out that it was extremely useful and helpful to everybody I was consulting. And then somebody in the big corporate world saw what I was doing and said, gee, David, we need those kind of results, more stability, more control, more focus or whatever in our whole company. Can you design some sort of training around what you've come up with? And that was essentially then threw me into the corporate training world. It was quite successful, did a pilot program back in 1983, 84 for a big corporation. And then I spent the next 20 years, just being thrown around from one company to the next just by referral. I never did any marketing, never did anything, just picked up the phone. People say, wow, you did this, but my husband or my wife works in this other company. They really need this, and they really want you to come in and do this. So I just wound up, with this kind of boutique, training and coaching business, just, hiring a few people because of the demand for doing it. And then at some point, somebody said, gee, David, you ought to write the book. And that was, 20 years later. It took me that long to really figure out, Fredrik, what I'd figured out, and that it was unique and nobody else seemed to have figured this out. And that it was bulletproof. You couldn't punch a hole in it. Anybody who captures stuff that has their attention, clarifies exactly what it means, organizes that in some trusted external brain, and reviews and reflects on it, is absolutely going to feel more confident, more in control, more focused, and have more space to think about more meaningful stuff. Period. So at that point, I said, okay, I guess now I'm confident enough that I can write the manual about what I've learned. That's when I wrote the first edition, anyway, of Getting Things Done, published in 2001. But I started doing this stuff in 1982. So.
Yeah, I read the first edition, and congratulations, by the way, to your massive success, David. But, I early on when I started as an entrepreneur, some of my mentors, they told me that mastery takes 15, 20 years. And you're like a prime example, because you said that, there's a lot of fake experts out there, fake expert that writes books and, they get on and sell thousands of copies and so on. But you've lived it for 20 years before you wrote that book. I think that's a very good example of real mastery of the system and the art. So. But for those,
I have to say, Fredrik, what was true too, and I didn't feel confident enough to really put it out until I was sure, I implemented this, and a lot of my consulting turned into coaching for mid to senior people that caught my training or read the book and said, oh my God, I need you one-on-one sitting desk side with me to help me implement this. And so I spent literally thousands of hours one-on-one desk side with some of the busiest and brightest folks you'd ever meet. That's why by that time, I was pretty sure that you couldn't punch a hole in this. And I was confident that it really worked. But it took, you're right, it took a long time for me to get to that place of confidence, because I'm not a kind of ta-da kind of person. I'm not a, wow, here's the new thing, and I think it really works. And so, you all go buy that book. I just, as a matter of fact, my book can be a bit overwhelming to people because I just put in there everything I'd learned in 25 years. Doing a lot of work, with a lot of bright people with this stuff and testing it out. And it went viral inside of some of the companies that if you knew those companies, you'd say, those are some of the best and brightest and busiest people you'd ever meet. And because it went viral inside of that environment, instead of being spit out, by their immune system, because it didn't stand toe to toe with the best. And mine did. So that then I finally had the confidence, to your point, that I could put it out, because it was pretty much my life work. So, it kind of bears the soul essentially to write a book about all that and say, here it is, folks, and here's how to implement it, if you want it.
Yeah, no, I applaud you for that. It requires a lot of bravery, you know. It requires a lot of bravery to write a book and put your ideas out there, because you're basically exposing yourself naked to the world and you're waiting for the feedback, you know. So,
Yeah. I
but
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how successful it would be. I just needed to write it to get it out of my head. In case I got run over by a bus, then somebody, at least it's out there somewhere in case anybody wants it. So it's kind of amusing to me and to see, how successful it then became.
you followed your own tips, basically. I love that. But there's a lot of young people out there, younger than me, that are millennials and Gen Z today, and they might not be familiar with the GTD system. What would you tell them? What's the one or two things you would like them to get away from today?
Well, first of all, don't keep things in your head. Write everything down. So externalize whatever your thoughts are, whatever's worrying you, whatever's bothering you, whatever opportunities you had, whatever thing, anything, little, big, personal, professional, get it out of your head. That's like job one, is to externalize it. And then sooner than later, go through whatever you get out of your head and decide what's the next action you would need to take if you're going to act on this at all. And then make that decision about what would you need to do to finalize this, get closure on it, get clarity on it. And then build some sort of a reflection system. At least once a week, step back and take a look at your life, your work, the stuff, your commitments, and kind of see where you are from a higher perspective. Those are the key elements. It's like capture and then clarify and then review. Those are sort of the three, I'd say, the key best practices. I mean, if you're really going to do this, you would need to capture everything that has your attention, decide on every one of those actions and outcomes, if there are any, and then have an intact organization system where you can park reference where it goes, trash where it goes, reminders of actions you need to take, where those go, a list of projects you need to keep track of, and any higher horizon stuff, goals, objectives, purpose, principles, any of those kind of things. Get those things out and in front of you, so you have a map essentially of your life and your work, and then keep that active and alive, as things change. So that's the whole game. But again, that's a lot for a lot of people if they haven't done that already. But this is not like a foreign language or some new technology. This is simple behaviors that everybody knows how to write stuff down. Everybody knows how to make a next action decision. Everybody knows how to make a list. Everybody knows how to look at a list and decide what to buy at the store off that list, or what errands they need to run off that list. So to some degree, and pardon me if this sounds a little rude, but to some degree, this is kind of duh.
No, but the simpler, the better, Sometimes the simpler, the more difficult it makes for people, because people are, what? It's that simple. So, but I listened to an interview you did some time ago where you said, well, how many hours do you think an NBA player or a soccer player or whatever athlete is preparing for a match or a game each week versus yourself, right? For your week. And for myself, I use your system. I love it. It's very, very effective for myself, and makes me clear my mind. I spend every Sunday perhaps 3 hours to plan the week, and I review. Like you're saying, the review is very important as one of the steps. But I don't know. Let's say that I'm a 23-year-old. I've never heard of David Allen. What's the system? How can I put it to use today? Why do I need to spend 3 hours, you would say?
Well, you only need to spend as much time as you need to feel comfortable about what you're doing. Right? You said everybody's feeling so anxious and so stressed out. Well, stop. What do you need to do to not feel that? Take as much time as it takes, unless you just love that feeling. Maybe that makes you feel worthwhile, that you're so stressed out and you can say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm so busy and whatever, because I'm so important. And you're just going to need to get rid of that bug, if you want to. And it's just up to you. I'm not out there preaching that everybody should do this. I say, look, if you just want a clear head, I can tell you how to do it. You have to decide whether you want that or not. So that's up to you. But again, one of the things we've written, like we 2 years ago, like co-authored the Getting Things Done for Teens, for teenagers. Actually, anybody between 12 and 25 could probably read that book and get a lot of value out of it. We just took the same methodology and put it more into terms that a young person might relate to. And And we just wrote last year, we wrote the Getting Things Done workbook. So that take sort of the 10 simple steps to take to really implement this. So you didn't have to read the whole book or decide you want to implement the whole thing. Look, here's the basic stuff if you really want to do that. And all you have to do is go to gettingthingsdone.com, our website, / YouTube, and you'll see all kinds of my interviews and TEDx talks I did and whatever. And if you like to kind of surf around and just, play on the computer and see that, you'll hear a lot of same versions of what you and I've just been talking about, but you'll hear them in many different contexts. So there are lots of ways you can play with this and start to think about it, start to get engaged with it. But that's up to you. It's up to you whether you really want to do that or not. I see a lot of kids that they just on an adrenaline rush, just it's like, true. Hey, and I think fine. I've been there. And that's okay. At some point though, a lot of kids, if they stop doing work, they'd get bored. If they stop, studying, they get bored. So go ahead, go do as much as you want. At some point, though, you're going to have kids. At some point, you're going to want to learn to play the flute as well as, get an MBA. Or at some point, you're going to want to do other things in addition to whatever it is that's got you spinning out there. And that's when life's going to get a little more complex for you. If you think graduating in life professionally is going to make things easier, think again. But whenever you start to feel like you're hitting a wall, that's when you probably want to, pick up my book, give it a read.
Absolutely. I second that. David, our audience loves small life hacks. I just have one or two more questions for you, but you said writing down things. So would you say having one notebook just for work-related lists and one for private-related lists and things to do, or would you combine into just one notebook for the listeners?
I've never made a distinction between any of those things. To me, it was just like, what am I committed to do? Personal, professional, doesn't matter. I just look like, what's next? What do I do now? And what do I do now? But you can do this however you want to do it. Just make sure it's out of your head and make sure you can look at it soon enough. And your list, getting stuff out of your head is not the same as a list of stuff that you've organized. Those are different things. That's why capture is step 1, but organize is step 3. You only need to organize what you've decided you're going to do about what you've captured. If anything, here's an errand to run. Here's a thing to talk to my wife or my husband about or my boss about, or here's the stuff I need to remind myself about next week. Anybody who keeps a calendar is already saying their head can't do it. And if you keep a calendar and trust that you'll look at your calendar at the right time, then that stuff that's on your calendar is not on your mind until or unless you need to review what's coming up, so you can locate yourself in space and time. So everybody already does some version of this already. Anybody who keeps a Post-it pad somewhere, keeps track of stuff they need to buy at the store, is already doing that, in that way. So it doesn't matter where you do it or how many places you capture it. Just make sure you don't lose the stuff. The problem with the digital you can record it on your iPhone or your smartphone or whatever if you want. The problem is those people then don't empty that. It goes in there somewhere, it went into a black hole. That's why most of my capture is low tech, because it's in front of me. It's in my face. It's right here, and I need to make sure that I clean this tab up, but then I have to decide what did I write down, what am I going to do about that. So that just goes in my physical in tray there. So capture is just no Wi-Fi, no batteries, none of that's required to be able to get stuff out of my head. But I keep, we're now using Office 365, and so I'm now have my lists are actually digital, but that's only because I go through my low-tech stuff and clarify and organize it, into my digital system. But I used a paper-based planner for 25 years. They work well too.
Yes. I use only paper notebooks, and I take notes on paper as well. I love that, the low tech, no fuss, like no complications. Yeah. David, I love how many books you have in the background. What's your favorite book?
Actually, one I'm reading right now, actually it's not here, it's in my living room where I'm reading. It's called Humankind. By Rutger Bregman. It's a hopeful history. It's all about the well-researched book about the goodness that actually sits within people. and then a lot of it's kind of a reading a riot act to sensational news that just focuses on the bad stuff and has people sort of addicted to that, as opposed to the really good stuff. And then most people are really good, and then when push comes to shove, people will tend to help each other out. It's a great book.
I like
Humankind. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it.
I'll check it out.
A must read. Yeah.
I'm an avid reader, so I'll definitely check it out. So.
Yeah.
David, where can people find more about you online, and where can they go to say hello to you on social media? And is there anything you would like them to check out particular?
Not really. Again, the YouTube channel, if you go to gettingthingsdone.com/YouTube, lots of stuff there that people can see and have fun with. Gettingthingsdone.com is our website if you're interested in training and coaching. That's, we've certified trainers and coaches all around the world now. So if you wanted to, wherever you live and whatever you are interested in, if you want to click on that, you'll see, certified trainers and coaches that are delivering this work in more intensive, ways, in terms of live seminars and virtual seminars and coaching and so forth that with this material. So those are good places to start. Just do a Google search, David Allen GTD, and you'll get a million places you could go. It's all over the place.
Awesome. Thank you for that, David. It's been a pleasure to have you here on the show. Really appreciate your valuable time. Like I said, I read your book many, many years ago. It has changed my life and my point of view on working in the professional life, and it made my life much better. So I'm very, very grateful. And I'm sure the audience have learned a lot from you as well. So thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Fika with Rice. I hope you enjoyed the show. Who do you want to have on our show? Let us know by sending me an email at fredrik@absoluteinternship.com. And before you go, if you like this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify to get to listen to more inspirational stories and life hacks. We really appreciate it. See you next time, and much gratitude for listening.